Hi, I'm Kyle Berger, a graduate student at the University of Oklahoma. This is the Performing Arts Center for the University of Oklahoma, spring semester 2018, in Dr. Bozorgi's graduate design 4 class. For such a complex project, there were a lot of different phases throughout the semester that we had to go through. A lot of these sketches display some of the design process during the conceptual design phase. So as you can see from this, we took a look at the site that we were going to place our building upon, did some sketching and analysis of site components and different factors from the site that could impact our building. And then from there, doing some initial sketching of some massings and some forms that our performance theater would take, and looking at some regional contexts to inspire those geometries, and figuring out spatial programming as well on how to situate the 3 theaters that this project would have. And we visited the Fred Jones Museum of Art here on campus, which they have a large section devoted to Oklahoma landscape paintings. And so this painting by Jacobson really displays the Oklahoma landscape in a really powerful way. This one inspired me through the design process. I thought it was powerful how in the painting it shows the contours of the red rock in the landscape that was naturally formed through erosion and natural processes. So the water carves away the natural landscape and creates these really rich geometries. And so looking at that, it really influenced the development of the overall form of the theater. So early in the design process, we took a look at the program of the building and its various requirements, and we did a design exercise where we took appropriate proportions of the different spaces and we laid them out according to adjacencies and relationships between the spaces. With such a complex project like the theater, we needed to wrap our heads around all the different spaces that the program requires. And so what this exercise helped us with was aligning the 3 primary theaters: the cinema, the performance hall, and the auditorium, and then all of the support spaces, which includes backstage, shops, rehearsal spaces, and then also the front of house, the public spaces, intermission lounges, and lobbies. And by doing so, the color coding them with green representing the theater spaces, and then the yellow are all of the support spaces for the staff to support the performances in those spaces. And then the blue spaces represent public spaces that filter into the theater for the visitors who are going to the shows, the public spaces, ticketing, concessions, and things like that. After doing the block program, we began to figure out what sort of form this theater project would undertake. And so this represents the early massing model that we worked on. We made physical models to really wrap our hands around this project and get a feel for the geometry and the form that our project would take shape in. So with this early massing, it represents the 3 theaters, which each have their own geometry to represent each theater, very similar to Renzo Piano's project in Rome. And with the strong geometries, each theater gets their own shape. And so whenever I worked with Dr. Bozorgi on this project, I brought him this massing, and we did an exercise where we took an X-Acto knife and we cut away at the site to create these varying contours to really reflect that strong idea, influenced by the artwork, at this idea of erosion forming the site and having a relationship between the site and the contours of the geometry. So after developing an early massing model, we made the model bigger and to undertake in the schematic design process. So what this allowed us to be able to do is to start beginning placing a column grid throughout our project that's going to help organize the structural system of the project, and then along with the column grid of the project, also modeling out the program spaces in more detail, aligning appropriate dimensions and circulation paths and walls for the project to really understand how the complex relationship between the various spaces work. And by doing this, we were able to make modifications to the schematic design plan to understand the column grid and also the site elements, how one coming to the theater is going to enter the project, and the procession of both vehicle and pedestrian paths, and understanding the layering that involves in a theater project with the seats and the functional spaces and mechanical, electrical shafts and things like that. So by doing this, we understood the modifications that we needed to make based upon where columns may fall in the grid and how people flow throughout the building and through the spaces. So this is the result of the completion of the schematic design phase of the project, and what this allows us to do is to portray the feeling of the project and its impression on both the site, and to give a context of how effective the project is in both serving the functional needs of what a theater needs, but also to create a really inviting and special environment for the visitors of the theater. And so, taking a look at the plan here, it was a challenge to understand the relationship of the spaces that a theater project requires, and so designing out all of the back of house and how that feeds into the function of the performers in the stage, including spaces for the stage shop and the rehearsal studio and the various dressing rooms involved with that. But also balancing out the functional needs with the needs of the visitors to enter the seating of the theater, how that procession and circulation works, but also making sure that there are enough service functions for the visitors and also the administrators that work in this building. And so the vehicle procession was also very important in the project, with how both pedestrians and vehicles are going to enter this building site. One of the outcomes that came about this project was how that carving away of the site was going to influence the project, and how that would be created within. And so the outcome of this decision was these various reflecting pools, which mirror that erosion of the site to both reflect the image of the theater in the water, but also as you drive by the theater, to this impression of these forms arising out of this erosion of the water. Along with this, the procession of the pedestrian from the street side down into this oasis plaza within that's tucked away. And so the challenge was, there's a concourse below ground which links the three theaters. The three forms above ground are not connected, so are not connected above grade, but below the ground is where the concourse happens. And so the challenge was to take something that's underground and how do we connect it to the outside, to the street level. And so that happened in this plaza space where there's a cascading waterfall that really opens up this basement level, so even though it's underground. This first graphic, it really gives a good depiction of the theater at night, which is a very key scene and a key view to focus in on, because at night is when a lot of people will visit the theater. Most of the performances and various shows will occur at night, and so it's important for this view to understand how the interior lighting will work, especially the treatment of solid versus void in the exterior enclosure, and also to give a sense of the visual phenomenon of the buildings reflected in that reflecting pool. Mm-hmm. And this graphic really gives a good sense of how the building engages with its site and all of the different activities that involve pedestrian and vehicle procession. Because the theater will mostly be in use in evenings for the shows, it is important that it still performs vitally during the day, both as a sculptural object, but also, especially in the plaza, a space for students to enjoy the outdoor space, maybe enjoy some coffee. It's still functional even when there aren't performances going on. And then with the interior of the theater, it's very important for it to not only be beautiful in a space that people are invited into, and is a grand space that really supports the performers, but also something that functions well, both acoustics and sight lines, and making sure that all of the spectators have good vision to the performance. And also understanding the catwalk spaces above for the functionality, understanding that balance between functionality and aesthetics with the theater. The section, the main section that cuts through the performing hall really helped to understand this relationship between all the different spaces, understanding how the mechanical feeds into the main performing space, all of the back of house functions with the curtains and the service elevators and the back of house functions, understanding how the front of house relates to the back of the house, and the overall flow of the project longitudinally through there. This interior rendering really helps express the visual phenomenon of the light coming in through the structural system, which was also act structural, as well as fins for shading the light to break up that light and really cool the building where there is a lot of glass exposure. And this exploded axonometric really helps understand the layering of the exterior envelope, understanding how the components come together to overall form the building, and how it also performs along with the regular structural makeup of the entire building as a whole, and zooming in on the details of the wall assembly and how this would be put together from a construction standpoint. And from site plan, we were able to understand how are people going to approach the site from Eamhoff Road and Chautauqua Avenue, and situating the reflecting pools to where it caters to the people who are in the glass spaces for the pre-function spaces of each one of the theaters. And then in elevation, able to understand how the exterior envelope functions, and also how these plays of solid versus voids and various translucencies act, and especially in this one here, understanding how those various angles of the geometries and the different pitches really play on this idea. Model helps to really understand all of these ideas coming together. And so looking at how the building is positioned on site, the various processions, vehicle procession to the parking garage and the underground ramps, and really expressing this idea of erosion and slowly coming down to the plaza area in the front, and then the overall composition of the three geometries that really reflects back to this idea of erosion, where the various angles of the geometry and the pitches of the roofs make it appear as if over time the winds of Oklahoma have really sculpted them at different angles, to where the building does not look like it was placed onto the site, but rather it was created from.